morning, everybody. I am Maria Navarro, the Superintendent of Charles County Public Schools. Thank you for being here. We are live streaming this meeting between the Board of Commissioners and the Board of Education this morning. We're going to start first with introductions, and then I'm going to hand it to my chairperson to do some welcoming for everybody. So again, Maria Navarro, Superintendent of Schools.
All right. Good morning, everyone. I will stand as well. I'm Yanel Morley, Chairperson of the Board of Education. Thank you all so much for this opportunity. Very much appreciated. Especially thank you to our commissioners. Appreciate the relationship that we have and that you all value education. So here's hoping that this will strengthen that relationship, right? A running joke with Commissioner Collins every time I see him is, did he bring his checkbook? So I'll allow my board members to introduce themselves, starting with our Vice Chair.
Guess I'll stand up too, since you guys started that. I'm Nicole Kramer. I'm the Vice Chairperson of the Board of Education, and I echo Chairperson Morley's sentiments. Thank you, Commissioner Collins, Commissioner Coates, and all of our commissioner partners for being here. I think this is a very important discussion for us to have today. Thank you to everyone who's here to take part in this, because I think it's really going to help just continue to strengthen our relationship. So thank you.
Right, David Hancock, District 1 Board of Ed, and I just want to echo my colleagues. I know we have collectively asked for this meeting several months ago. Yeah. Now that the blueprint is kind of the law of the land, and how it does have a lot of good things in the blueprint, but it places a burden on the budget. And it's nice. I want to thank our commissioners for being here to discuss a path moving forward. So thank you.
Hi, Mike Lucas. Thanks for being here today, and as always, appreciate your support.
Thomas, thank you for being here today. And we need your support. Good morning. And District 4, thank you for being here.
I am Samisha Thomas, District 1, and I really do appreciate you guys being here. I'm excited to see where we can have some synergies that allow us to be able to support the students, because I feel like education is really accountable for everything we need to do. The springboard is to make sure we get.
Good morning. My name is Vicki Majors. I'm the Chief Human Resources Officer, and I am always honored to work with anyone that will help us secure high-quality teachers who provide instruction to our kids.
Wow.
No pressure, no pressure.
Good morning, everyone. Ruben Collins, President of the Board of Commissioners. Always a pleasure to be with you, continuing what was a commitment at the very beginning of my tenure as President of the Board of Commissioners, to increase the level of dialogue between our boards, because we understood how important the implementation of the blueprint is to our future. And so we're here, we're in listening mode, anticipating a continuation of those efforts to work together. So thank you very much. And I want to add, I was with the commissioner presidents of our neighboring counties, and they were sharing the challenges that they have with the implementation of the blueprint, to the extent that they raised property taxes. And we're talking about two very conservative jurisdictions. I'm proud of the efforts of our government to ensure funding for public education, at the same time recognizing the challenges that exist as we move forward. We will continue to be partners. We will continue to work together for our children and for our city. Thank you.
Wow, I don't have to say anything. He said it all. Oh, good morning, everyone. Thomasina Coates, I'm representing District 2. Thank you for the invite, and as always, your partnership. So we appreciate what you do for the community and continued support. Thank you again, and I look forward to the engaging conversation.
Just some time to introduce yourself.
Yeah, I don't want to go before you, Commissioner. Or would you like to go? Go ahead. Hello. Good morning, everybody. I'm Deb Hall. I'm the acting county administrator. For those of you who don't know me, I have worked actually here. It was interesting to walk into this same room. I gave many presentations here long ago in this room, so it's nice to be back. And on behalf of all of our staff, we have a great working relationship with the Board of Ed, our fiscal services department, our legal departments. Everyone works very well together, and we're always grateful for that relationship. So thank you. Nice to be here.
Good morning, Commissioner. We're just doing introductions, Commissioner.
I get that, right? So thank you. It's good to be here this morning. It's always good to come here, especially this time of year. I know everyone is excited about the start of the new school year. And just so thank you for everything that you're doing for the county and for all of our little ones and all the little ones to come. So thank you.
Thank you.
Real quick, what's up with this green theme?
It was peach.
This is a good segue for Ms. Walker Washington to just say hello and introduce herself.
I always miss the memo on that.
Hi, I'm Dr. Walker Washington, and I represent District 3, the best district in Charles County. And thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Adams?
Good morning, everybody. My name is Wes Adams. I'm the county attorney, and I'm just happy to be here. And we'll listen to what everybody has to say. And of course, you all know I help my commissioners make sure everything from our side is going well and that we can work together and implement what's necessary.
Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. I am James Dyer. I am the Acting Director of Fiscal Administrative Services, which is essentially the finance department for Charles County. And I'm also, on my side job, I am also the Chief of Budget for Charles County government. So I'm working several jobs right now, but I'm happy to be here and happy to have a conversation on the blueprint and the budget needs of Charles County.
I'm Carol DeSoto. I'm the clerk to the Board of Commissioners, so I just help coordinate your meetings. So thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Marvin Jones. I'm the Chief of Schools, and I just want to thank you guys for the relationship and the partnership, our county commissioners, and for joining us today, but also for your staff. So I think it's important that the staffs are here, the folks who do that behind the scenes work. I really appreciate this opportunity to sort of chat about that. So thank you guys.
Good morning, I'm Kevin Lausch, Chief of Teaching and Learning, and I also want to thank everyone, both the board and the commissioners for their support of the public schools. And talking to other chief academic officers around the state, I realize how fortunate we are to be both supported by the board and the commissioners on the blueprint and moving forward. So thank you all.
Good morning. I'm wearing blue for
Love it.
Charles. I am the Charles County Blueprint Implementation Coordinator. I just want to echo what everybody has said previously, that my counterparts around the state are incredibly jealous of our working relationship between the Board of Commissioners and the Board of Education, and that makes my job a lot easier. So I thank you for that relationship, and I look forward to the continued working relationship that we have with these two boards. So thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Karen Acton, the Chief Financial Officer for Charles County Public Schools, and like everyone has said, I certainly appreciate the collaboration that we have between your board and our board and your staff and my staff. We work closely together, and while it doesn't solve all of our problems, it does make it a little bit easier to do what we need to do. So I thank you for your time today, and hopefully everyone will learn something new, and we'll continue to work together to implement the blueprint.
Ms. Smith.
Yes, hello, good morning. Apologies for being a little late. I'm Jamila Smith. I serve as the board member for District 2. Echo what I've heard thus far in terms of our working relationship with our commissioners. I really appreciate all of the collaborative investment, not only in all of the programs that we offer, but also our conversations when it comes to budget time. So really appreciate you all being here and having this conversation. Thank you.
And we have some additional guests. Sean, may I start with you? We can just quickly go around and if people can introduce themselves.
Sean Howell, President of the Education Association of Charles County. I like what was said by Ms. Miller, that go to meetings with other presidents, this kind of work together is not always what's done across the state, so thank you all.
Good morning, sir. Would you like to introduce yourself?
My name is William Johnson of BJ's Transportation. We transport your students. We're glad to do it, and we hope to keep on doing it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Debbie Johnson, also bus contractor for the county.
Morning.
Jennifer Jordan, contractor, owner, operator, and secretary for Charles County School Bus Contractors Association.
Good morning, Mike Heim, Chief of Operations and Supporting Services for Charles County Public Schools. And again, just glad that everyone could get together today to collaborate together to support education in Charles County. So thank you all.
Good morning, Charmaine Thompson, Chief of Instructional Technology. Excited to be here and hear the collaboration. Thank you.
Good morning, I'm Shelley Matthews, the Director of Communications. I'm excited to be here. Can I also add a little side note here? Our team is live streaming, so if you are at a table with a mic that is on a stand and you speak, if you could please just bring that mic towards you so that we can catch your audio. Thank you.
Got it. Eric Schwartz, in-house counsel for Charles County Public Schools.
Christina, Commissioner's Office.
Terrence McCants, Charles County Government Security.
So, good morning, everybody. Thank you so much. Karen and Chris and I will be doing this presentation, primarily myself, but I will turn and phone a friend at points in the presentation. So I just wanted to go back to, the boards have met before to discuss the blueprint when it was coming out early on, and I appreciate the reality that we are in a what I called an arranged marriage. We know we have to work with each other. We have ups and downs, but we are fully committed to doing that. And we have a great working relationship with staff in county government, and that is extremely important for us. This summer, I reached out to the commissioners and Commissioner Collins asking if we were going to go after a grant from AIB that allowed us to have a partner come in and work with school systems and their county governments to do some fiscal trajectory projections out of education funding over multiple years as we look at the implications of the blueprint law, along with all of the other expenses of daily operations in school systems. And Commissioner Collins said, absolutely, this makes sense. And voluntold Jake and his staff, who were also, I'm sure, very excited to work with us. So we are here first to discuss a little bit more about the where we are in terms of the overall picture of school financing as we see it. And I have to tell you that throughout this presentation, I want you to come to terms with the fact that two things that seem very polar opposite could both be true at the same time. And you'll see what I mean with that as we talk about data, about the school system, the demographics of the school system, and the demographics and changing demographics in the county. And it's just the way it is. And absolutely, we had the blueprint law that really looked to do some major reform work across the state, which is extremely important, and it put out some very ambitious targets for public education. It doubled down on investing, in public education, which is, of course, for us, extremely important. But there's other things operationally and that our community seeks to have that go beyond the blueprint. So part of that is also just giving you an overview of what that is. So our goal for today is, we've done introductions, which is great, so we know who's around the table. But we want to discuss some data around the school system, the enrollment, the finances, what we're spending funding on, what's costing us, what are the requirements of how we are able to use funding that we get both at the state level and at the local level. And we're going to hone in a little bit more on local funding because of the commissioners joining us today, and some of the details of requirements that come along with the blueprint law. We, at the end, want to get agreement from both of our boards to continue this work and to meet later in the beginning of 2025 when actually the work group that is both the school system and county government have been able to go and delve deeper into the fiscal projection work so we can come to you with more details on numbers, because the devil's in the details, right? And so we want to be able to come back to you, and so hopefully today you're able to ask us questions, and then we can come back to you with a much deeper report. I also think it's going to be important. We will once again see the commissioners as well as our delegates and senators at the legislative breakfast that the board will host in early November. I think that's also going to be another check-in point as we look at legislation that has impact on school funding. And I think it'll be a busy legislative season as it relates to school funding. So a couple of information points. The data at a glance, I think we took close to about 10 years worth of data. It is important to note that Charles County is a growing county. I don't need to say that to any of you around the room because
Right.
you all know that. But our student enrollment, the only year that we saw a decline in student enrollment was the first year when we were closed, the year that we were closed for COVID. And I think that was a national move, right? We had a lot of families that had to figure out education, and they no longer had a public school to physically go to and make some options. But a lot of those families also returned. Some of them did not, but a lot of those returned back to public education. We continue to grow in enrollment. We are in the second full week in September, so I don't count butts and seats until at the end of September, because what we have projected right now, and our projections keep going up, will be even higher, especially as we have expanded pre-K. We are excited, especially if you love 3-year-olds. We projected that at the Early Learning Center Waldorf, we would have 150 kids, and I think we're in the 180s. So we're excited that we have families taking this option. But that means that there's a lot more costs, right? And there's a lot of interest and a lot more costs that go along with that. At the same time as we've had increases, it is important to understand that many of our students are now impacted, a larger percentage of our students are now impacted by poverty than before. And so in the last almost 10 years, you can see that really the percentage has hiked up. And that is concerning because those families need more supports. So what is interesting is, as a county, and this is one of my 2 truths at the same time, as a county, we have become a wealthier county. However, the children, as they have increased the enrollment in our schools, more of them are impacted by poverty. And that's just an important dichotomy to keep in mind as we think about, as we in education think about the investments that we must do in public education to even the playing field for all of our students to have access and opportunities, regardless of where they come from. It is also important to understand how local government has funded public education. And this is an important data slide. We also went back about 10 years. You see the funding in the mid 2016, 2017. The school system has always received above maintenance of effort, but you can see the jump the last 3 years. And I think this is what Commissioner Collins was mentioning around doubling down on the support of the blueprint reform. We know that the blueprint was going to call for more investment into public education, and that is exactly what we see in the last 3 years. As the county has increased with its wealth, it has also looked at and supported public education, emphasizing all of the growth that we have done in programs. So we want to thank the commissioners publicly because we see the investment locally and we're able to mobilize on those investments. Here's another data point. So I just showed that we've gotten more investments. However, as we have grown as a county and as the wealth index has grown as a county, as part of one of the agencies of the county, we have seen at the same time more year-to-year investment, but we've lost ground on what we our percentage of sort of the slice of the pie, if you will, right? What percentage of the total funding that is allocated every year to the county that with county funds is allocated to education? And so our concern in the school system is that we've lost ground from 45.4%. We made that makeup of the county's budget. Now we are straddling around 41.2%. And just for context, that difference of 4 percentage points or so, it equates to like $22 million. I can't remember, we did the math in my office. So it is a big chunk of change of differences. So one of the things that we will continue to advocate for is being able to restore that sort of slice of the pie that makes up public education. And at the same time, we understand that the county is growing. It needs to support a lot of agencies that are doing great work. We have great working relationships with all of the agencies of the county, but we're educators, and so we advocate for public education, and this is just an important slide to note. So another complicating factor where this work group, intergovernmental work group that we're working on to define the fiscal trajectory of public education for the next 3 or 4 years. One of the other things that's important is when the blueprint law came to be, we had more and more funding that was restricted. The blueprint, by definition, was very specific in calling out that the money must follow certain groups of students. For example, the expansion of pre-K, there was funding for that. Impacting students, funding following students highly impacted by poverty, students that receive special education services, students who are multilingual. So the funding has now become more restricted. The funding that we get from the state level, and by law and mandates, the funding that the commissioners locally also give us, by law, it is more restricted than it used to be. Why is that important? Well, a couple of things that are important to note. When we in public education have always said that public schools have been underfunded in general on a couple of different areas. 2 of the biggest areas are transportation and special education. The funding that we have received as long as I have been in Maryland public schools, school systems, and it's not just Charles County, school systems consistently overspent in those 2 categories than what we are allocated. And again, we are not alone in this trend. This is really a state trend. So for example, by the end of the year when we closed the books and said, how much did we spend in special education, providing services to students, occupational therapists, speech therapists, classroom teachers, specialized schools, right? We always have to spend more funding than the allocated amounts both at the state and the local level. Same thing with transportation. We have a more complex transportation system, and schools across the state are doing more complex systems. So many times, special education transportation, right? We have buses that are routed all the way, some of them even go up to Baltimore City, but we have a lot of buses that go to non-publics with 1 or 2 students that we have to do because of that specific educational requirements for the students. Inside the school system, we're also moving kids everywhere. I mean, you've heard me talk about the fact that students can go to CSM. Now they're going to start in the Hughesville campuses because of program pieces. There's a lot of movement during the day, and there's a lot of bus movements that go beyond what used to be traditionally pick up the kid in front of their house or in the corner and take them to school, and then pick them up from school and take them home. That is all changing. We have transportation where we're transporting kids to work site jobs as they get into high school, and they're doing apprenticeships, internships. We have, as we expand pre-K, we are bringing, I think it's several, at least 15 or so schools that directly feed the Early Learning Center in Waldorf. So imagine how many bus routes we have throughout the day. So transportation is a highly complex process in public education because as we expand options and opportunities of where our students are learning, we're no longer just using the traditional schools. So we spend more money, right? So the other piece, and I think the pre-K expansion has increased our costs because, as you all know, if you have little kids, they seem to be always more expensive than bigger kids. But we do, and so last year when we looked at our budget, we spent more than what we were even allocated, even through the additional blueprint funding. So that's just important to know. Locally also, when you look again at the blueprint funding here at the bottom, what you see with this number of the total funding that we received and the blueprint funding, you see that 136 million of the 218 million that we received are restricted funds. They are very specific on what we can and cannot use funding for. So we begin to limit our resources to be able to pay additionally for the additional bus transportations that we have to do, the additional enhancements that we need to do to schools. So the fiscal reality is that we're much more restricted in how we can spend funding. So an important note, and I think perhaps as the commissioners attended MACO and talked to their counterparts, one of the things that we are reminding the public is that blueprint funding and the blueprint initiatives are extremely important, and all of that reform work is happening in Charles County Public Schools. But it is not the only work that's happening in Charles County Public Schools. So, for example, there is a slew of things that you can see around this ring of things that we do and we invest in that are important to our community. You will all be invited to see the McDonough facility renovations where we have expanded our arts programs. It is beautiful, and I hope you guys go to one of the plays that they put on in the Box Theater. It's kind of cool and quaint, right? Those are important investments. The pipeline of figuring out how the industry of the arts is a pathway for our students is an important local investment that we did to that building to attract a system-wide set of options for kids who that's going to be their livelihood, and that is going to be their career choice. And so we invest local dollars. It's not written on the blueprint, but it is very much an emphasis of the school system. I'll give you another example. Those wonderful devices that our students sometimes take home and don't love as much as we want them to. We have a huge infrastructure. We have 28,000 plus students. I think we'll be closer to 29,000 by the time we count every kid in October. But we have about 60,000 plus devices that we manage in the school system. Why? Because we gotta constantly repair and bring back and everything else. We manage a lot of devices that we have. So the cost of having virtual, online systems is expensive. And that is not necessarily something that comes with the blueprint funding. But it is an infrastructure that we are now all teaching in, and is the reality of how students are learning. So there's several of those pieces. I mentioned transportation. Last year in the budget, I requested funding to the board, and the board agreed for after-school extracurricular opportunities for students in middle schools, and then transportation for middle and high schools. And it was a tough budget year, and there were many things that the commissioners funded. But at the end of the day, when we had a set of asks and we weren't fully funded from our set of asks, that is something that we could not implement. However, I will say that since I've been here, that is what I hear a lot of parents ask for. So we still have that request from our community that we just are not able to fund because we have to live within the means that we are given. So there are things locally that we need to think about, and as we assess what the community is interested in and what they need, and what we as educators also see expanding opportunities for students, we've got to work within our means, but at the same time, there's more and more of those asks. And for us, going back to, we don't want to lose our slice of the pie is an important conversation, because we want to make sure that the education that now, that parents of our kids had as they were residents in Charles County continues to be funded at the same levels that their children are being funded. And so that's an important piece as we think about all of these pieces. Safety and security, class sizes, we've expanded world languages. A couple of our board members, our board chairs, very passionate about world languages. We expanded these opportunities. Frankly, Charles County was behind in a lot of these things that exist in other public schools, and we needed to expedite those programs being available to our students. So as I mentioned at the beginning, thank you, commissioners, because we needed to go into this work. It's not about just highlighting the needs and sort of saying, we have a lot of needs, we have a lot of needs. We have a responsibility to work through and provide both boards options and projections. We can't just come in and complain, well, public education just needs to be funded, we all need to fund it and everything else. What we're trying to do with this cross-functional work group is to spend time and to do a fiscal picture for the next 3 or 4 years as we look at tax revenue projections in the county, growth in the county, growth in the school system, and then system needs. And be able to kind of say, okay, what do we project these funding requests to be? Because I think we have to be working not just a year out. We need to be working 2-3 years out to understand the way that the trajectories will happen. And I have elected officials all around the table. We as staff have a responsibility to give them plans, even if those elected officials change at any point in time, because the county is still the county, and that's an important long-term picture. And I appreciate that the boards understand that our work as staff is to make sure we understand and provide detailed information on what those projections really look like so that people can make better decisions. And collectively, we make better decisions and concessions if we need to on what we can do, when we can do it, when can things roll out potentially for our students. And so what we want to make sure is, so we're asking in terms of really the two boards, two quick things. We want to make sure that we have a lot of engagement around this legislative season because we do think that it will be a legislative season where education is going to be part of the discussions. And so our breakfast, we will make sure that we have a hot breakfast, a welcoming breakfast, a comfort food breakfast as we talk about that. But those are important pieces. And again, the rest of our delegation will join us during that time. But it is important to just discuss advocacy pieces and where we stand, where we can stand together as Charles County, and where we may have different perspectives about how to move forward. And then what we want to do is come back to you in early 2025 to really be able to now show you the fruit of our labor, of our meetings, to see what those trajectories look like. And together with the Board of Education and the Board of Commissioners, unpack some expectations and some needs that are projecting out for the school system and understand what that fiscal impact looks long-term. So I'm going to pause here and see if there are questions or comments moving forward. I'll pass it to Ms. Morley to facilitate that conversation.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Navarro. Are there any questions, comments? I have a question, Dr. Navarro. You touched on this briefly. Can you explain, can you hear me, Ms. Fine? I was just going to ask, should I slide the mic? I'm good? Okay. Can you explain a little bit, and you touched on this, when we have to make those tough budget decisions, when we have a tough year like we're having now, what does that look like for CCPS? What types of things do we have to do without? I know you mentioned activity buses. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, so we had a budget ask, and I think we were around 16.9 million that we asked for that we didn't get. So we prioritized. One of the things that we did to make sure that it didn't impact programs, so I just mentioned the arts program at Magruder, is that we used a little bit of end of year balance.
McDonough.
McDonough.
I think that's our new
Sorry.
school.
No, we just built it. I think Jake would have a heart attack. McDonough. And we used a little bit of end-of-year funding to frankly pay for the lighting and all of the equipment and so forth that the program needed so that it could start in a really good place at the beginning of this year. But we also didn't do some things. So you did mention, we prioritize what are the things that we put off. And the communication that I gave to our community was, we're holding off on it. Part of doing fiscal projections out into multiple years is to get a sense of those things that the community wants. When could we potentially maybe roll it out, right? It's this idea of not saying to communities, we're still working through this. This is not a simple yes, no, we're working in partnership to figure out when could some of this begin to flow. But we didn't expand some other things. I mean, we had on the budget expanding PPWs and counselors to 12 months, and we didn't do that. We didn't expand, Karen?
So the youth engagement officers for the middle schools?
The advocates, yep. We didn't expand the youth engagement advocates to our middle schools. They're remaining in high schools. We slowed that down a little bit.
And technology, we had to cut the budget for technology and replacement of devices.
So, yeah, so we make some tough choices, and I think part of it is...
And the biggest part, though, was instruction. We cut curriculum and books and textbooks, and we tried to fund that with end-of-year funding, but we were not able to move it forward in the budget.
Yep.
Can I ask a question? Hi, I'm Jake Dyer again. Can you maybe explain what the additional funds that the county commissioners did give you, the $11 million above maintenance effort, what did those funds go towards?
Yeah. So what Jake is asking is there are some funding that the county gives us every year that is outside of maintenance of effort for different projects. And some of those are actually even CIP projects that go beyond. But can we talk about the specifics on that?
Sure. So the main items that we were able to fund were the expansion of the pre-K in Waldorf. We would not have been able to do that without that additional funding. And then, unfortunately, the ongoing mandatory costs that we have each year, healthcare increases, bus contract increase, liability insurance increase. So that was the main thing, was the pre-K expansion.
And I'm assuming those funds also supported collective bargaining assumptions and so forth?
Yes,
yes.
yes. Okay. We were able to honor the collective bargaining assumptions that we had. We had a 2-year agreement with our EACC union, so we were able to fund that as well.
Ms. Thomas and then Ms. Bella Washington.
Dr. Navarro, I know one of the things that we talk about when we talk about projection and budgeting, there are many things that we can project and we can do estimated costs, but we have some also uncontrollable costs that kind of will surprise us. And sometimes those become a lot more burdensome for the funding that we've already projected for than we thought about. And one that comes to mind is when you talk about healthcare. You have a considerable number of employees who have some kind of healthcare crisis. It becomes costly. That's an increase in the burden that comes on the school board that may be unexpected. Can you talk a little bit about how you try to mitigate for those and also give some other examples of things like that that will impact the school system that are outside of budget and planning that end up being something that will impact our other projections?
Yeah, so I'll start and then I'll pass it to Karen a little bit. The reality is that any agency that has employees has to have a educated estimate based on what they paid out every year on employee cost. And that's, we have that. But last year, I think we mentioned, we saw a huge bump. And I actually think, probably the county with some of their costs might have seen some of these huge bumps. That is tied many times to the regulatory, sometimes it's capped on medical decisions that are done federally on cost and coverage. So we saw an increase that we just were not expecting because the year before and the year before that, we just didn't see that balloon up. And that can be a bump that all of a sudden is a $2 million bump that was not expected. I'll say also that sometimes we have things that break or leak or just go dead that we were not expecting based on just maintenance, continuous maintenance. We do have our funding set aside to project for some of these things, and sometimes we go above those projections. I don't know what else in terms of last year that we also experienced.
So throughout the year, I come to the commissioners with intercategory budget changes, which are a result of things happening throughout the year that we didn't anticipate when we budgeted, because by law, we can't go over budget on the categories. The health insurance was one of those items that, we are self-insured and we don't know that there's going to be a crisis of any sort for certain people or how costly it will be. So that was one of the mandatory cost increases that we asked for. And along those lines, we implemented a new ERP system, which ended up costing, more than we anticipated. And we did move money from fund balance to cover that. And that is, the purpose of fund balance is that throughout the year, we try to manage within the budget that we have. If we have repairs that are needed on the maintenance side, we try to make sure that it stays within budget. But sometimes it's out of our control, and when that happens, we pull from the fund balance so that we can do the necessary items that we need to do. One of those, being the health insurance that we have to fund, but the other is maintenance is a big item, and ERP.
I know something else you spend a considerable amount of money on is school lunches. And people don't realize that that's the six figures of just, unfunded school balances. 1 second, Commissioner Collins. And could you please just expand a little bit on fund balance? I know you're probably tired of answering this question, but, for the benefit of the public and our millions that may have missed it.
Sure.
Yes. And then Ms. Washington.
Sure. So fund balance is, in essence, the emergency fund that the school system has, so that we don't have to go back to the commissioners and ask for more money, because we do have to have a balanced budget by law, and these unexpected things that happen throughout the year that we're not able to manage within the budget that we have. As Dr. Navarro said, the funding has changed dramatically since the blueprint law. We have a good portion of our funding now is restricted and can only be used for certain items, which doesn't allow us as much flexibility as we used to have to move money around and to cover these expenses. So the fund balance is there as a safety net so that we're able to take care of the unexpected items that happen throughout the year. We have a portion of it that we set aside for health insurance increases, also technology issues that may come up, and then a basic reserve that we have.
Okay, Ms. Butler Washington, then Commissioner Collins.
All right, thank you. I'm going to be talking to the commission because I'm going to ask this question since I got all the question. When you calibrate the expense bills and Jake on the list when you have the library, CSM, and education, I was going to ask, can you separate that? It could be something like library service funding, which is the public, and we know we have to fund that. Higher education funding, the students pay CSM, and we pay CSM. And public is free. That's the community. So when you're doing the money, you can have a sense of urgency of where the money should go, because the blueprint is here, it's law, and we must do, we got to pass it. So just having those categories there would be able to trigger something to say, free public education needs to get this amount of money. CSM, higher education, because they get money from the governor, and they get money from federal, and students pay them. So that's a big difference of the slice of money that they get. So just keeping that in mind. I'm not telling you how to do your job. I'm just keeping that in mind of how we can make sure that we don't decrease, and hopefully we can get back to where we were. So I'm going to leave that right there. If we want our community to strive, we got to have an educational system that is funded. And I say that because we're not just competing just for Maryland. We want our students to compete on the world stage. By being on the world stage, that means that we need to put education first. We understand on the federal, it's number 5. It should be number 2 to me, right up on the economy. But that don't say that the county can't do that. We could do that. Economy first, education second, and everything else follow in line. But, these are our students, which is gonna be our future, and that we hope that they can play and stay in Charles County. So if we don't make that happen, that's a downfall for us. And the next thing is raising taxes. It's been 12 years. And the reason I say that is, if you raise taxes and explain it to the community about what you're raising it for, because we're predicting over here that we can build 2 facilities for our pre-K. One to support 1 and 2, and the other one to support 3 and 4. That will solve our pre-K problem if we be able to do something like that. But that's on you, but I just want to make sure that we say this while we got your attention and saying things like this, because if you don't say it, you don't know it, so it won't be. And then the last thing is, I know y'all building the Sports Rex and Learning Center, and I will hope that you would partner with a nonprofit tutoring program or Huntington and Learning Center, so they can be able to, we can help each other. While we giving our students something to do, but we also educating them on the second hand. So, me being me, I went out and asked a couple of questions to some of the nonprofits and to Huntington. They said the question has never been asked before. So if you don't ask, we don't know. So they didn't say no right off the bat. They just said, well, it's never been asked of us before. So that's something that we can think about, partnering with them so they can help us with our students, because believe it or not, the students belong to all of us, because if they are on the backs of the community, that means that they're on the backs of us. So we want to make sure that every child succeeds. So that's my little 2 cents. Thank you.
Commissioner Collins.
Where we are at total agreement is our commitment to establishing Charles County as a top-tier public education system. There's no doubt about that. The challenge, I think, is continuing to bore forward on the whole notion of implementation of the blueprint. A question that I've actually posed to the state superintendent. During this period that we move forward with total implementation of the blueprint, how do we measure success? And what I mean by that is, at the same time we're talking about funding for the blueprint, when we're assessing the performance of our public education system overall, what are the measuring sticks that we have in place? This is a perfect opportunity for me, because I see, certainly on social media, numbers in terms of performance of the school system overall. And they're not necessarily the best. And so my question is, how do we grade the commitment that we have to the blueprint? Conversely, addressing needs as it relates to performance. Because those are the kind of things, Ms. Washington, the public comes at us when we make these decisions. Those are the kind of things that they look at. They're looking and asking questions about performance. If they're not seeing our numbers, at the top in terms of math proficiency, reading, etc., those are the questions that come to us. And so, again, I want to get back to the point. We're on the same page. We want an elite, top-tier public education system. But, and again, this is a question that I raised to the state superintendent. Because I think all of us, and I know this board is committed to fully funding, to the best of our ability and capacity, public education. But we also require, because our citizens require, that level of proficiency, that those are what people are measuring. I'm telling you, that's what people are looking at. And so I'm asking this, as a citizen, how are we able to grade the commitment, which is, we're talking about the you know, capacity as it relates to budget right now. But how do we braid that to the performance questions that are in place?
Yes. So, you know, I think that's the question parents ask me, and tax-paying parents ask me as well as people who don't have children in our school system, live here, and are taxpayers. And I think it's a great question because the reality is that we have a presentation later today, and I know you have a meeting, but I encourage the commissioners to follow our presentations on the state assessment. The state took collectively, the state didn't do well this year on the state assessments. We actually were on a good trajectory upwards, and for the most part, we were stagnant in our performance. And Charles County followed exactly the same trajectory that the other school systems did on the state assessment. And so part of it is everybody holding themselves accountable. And accountability is not double down. I got a question from a peer around, are you gonna talk about the state assessment results in public? And I said, absolutely, because when we had the highest third grade reading score that we've had, even with numbers before the pandemic last year, we had that reading score that we haven't had for third graders since, we hadn't seen those scores since like 2017, 2016, and we ramped back up. We lost momentum in third grade. We have a responsibility to all of our parents and our citizens to go back and explain, so what do we do? So what do we do when we lose traction on our continuous progress? What are we doing? What is every single committed staff member that works in Charles County doing as a result of it? And that's what we're talking about today. But I also think it's important to understand the other metrics that are tied, that we are following carefully around the other areas in the blueprint, which are important to note. And Shelley, when is the State of the Schools presentation? It's October 2nd at 7 p.m. This is when, virtually, you will all receive an invitation. I come to the public and say, what's the state of our schools? So we have multiple data indicators of success. One of them is the percentage of kids that are reading by grade level and doing math by grade level at certain points in times. But I will also say that I'm extremely proud of the work the staff here has done around other indicators that are also tied to the blueprint that we also need to get the message out. For example, last year, staff doubled the number of kids taking advanced placement courses in high schools, doubled it, and lost no momentum in the scores the kids received. Because I, as an educator, have heard for many years, well, if you let certain kids in, like you let Karen in, you know, the whole class goes down. That did not happen, which is an indicator of a couple things. We didn't just tell teachers, hey, let these kids in. We invested in summer pre-preparation programs so that if kids have never had an AP level class, they prepare themselves before they start the school year with those teachers who can help them succeed. We expanded the number and invested in the number of teachers that we sent to the College Board advanced placement training programs that they have over the summers, even if some of them didn't teach advanced placement quite yet, because it is a rigorous, really good professional learning. So it's one of these things where you invest on a couple of things to secure the achievement. So I am really proud of some of those advancements. We are monitoring with an assessment called Acadians, how well our investments in pre-K are gonna pay out as kids get to meeting those third grade reading levels and so forth. So it's a mixed bag of data, but I think I agree 100%, and we are committed to being transparent on the data points that we do well in and the data points that we still need to work on. And we absolutely need to continue to work on some data points around achievement, because I agree, I feel responsible to taxpayers every single day about what are the dollars that you're asking us to invest in public education getting us. And I think, Commissioner, and I think this board holds all of us accountable to make sure that those results improve. So I do want to do a quick plug for the millions that are watching, that it is important for all of our families to tune into those state of the schools discussions and PowerPoint slides, and we record them and we send them out later on in chunks of information, because there are some metrics that we are excelling in and there's some metrics that we need to continue to work on, and we gotta be accountable to our community on what we're doing to improve where we're not.
And if I could add, the biggest thing for me, Commissioner Collins, is that we don't run from it. You know, you'll notice this board is not afraid of the uncomfortable conversations. Many of us have no problems being very direct, however, it comes across. Dr. Navarro and the Vice Chair and I meet every week to talk about these types of things. We have restructured our agenda so that the data and the strategic plan is prominent. It's featured. It's something that we present to the public at every meeting, so people tuning in at any given point can understand exactly where we are. Oftentimes, as you know, these data points are one small portion of the picture. And so we're trying to paint the entire picture, because of course the good news doesn't get the same type of press as some of the unfortunate results, just being very candid. And there are things that we do phenomenally well every single day. We're very, very proud of our staff. We're very proud of our students. We're very proud of our schools. And we work every day to improve on that. Sometimes we fall short, just being very candid, but that doesn't mean that you don't try again the next day. And we have spent an incredible amount of time and resources to address where the students need that support. And that is a lot of what we spend our time talking about. It's a lot of what Dr. Navarro does. It's a lot of what our staff does. These are the trends. These are the shortfalls. How can we prevent this from becoming worse? What types of things do we need to do? Can we offer more supports in summer school, for example, which has been hugely successful? So those are the types of things that we don't just say, oh, that looks like it's going to be a problem. We're definitely never going to run from it. We have no problems being very direct, but we expect and embrace the public holding us accountable. I appreciate that, sir. A few hands. I saw Ms. Stewart and then Mr. Lucas. Commissioner Stewart.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I have a few things.
Okay.
So I've been listening and taking everything in. I want to first say thank you for a few things. Let's see, where do I want to start? Let's go back to the blueprint. I just heard you say that, the data points is just one part of the picture, and it's not the entire picture. That is so true. I so agree. I agree with you on that. But at the same point, we do we do use data to make decisions, not just the commissioners. You guys do too, right? One of the things I think it's really important to talk about is the data that every district is going to start receiving, and they've already started receiving regarding the blueprint. I think it's really important for the commissioners to make sure that they are aware of the data review teams that are coming in and the annual reports that are being released and posted on the website. And we'll be able to use those reports to show growth. We'll be able to use those reports to look at the recommendations and accommodations for each school district. So as a commissioner, I will continue to pay close attention, especially to the blueprint reports.
I'm glad you said that.
Yes.
That's my
Because we're talking about that today too.
Yeah, okay. So I'm very familiar of the process and what goes into the process when the teams come out. And I'm very aware of all of the hard work that each school district around the county, around the state, the time and effort you have to put in to prepare for the review teams. And then when the reports come out, I can just imagine the conversations that you guys are having to look for rooms for improvement, and then, to pat the staff on the back for in the areas that they are showing, superior work in. So I think that's important to continue to put out to not just the commissioners, but the public about that. The other thing is I appreciate something you said, Dr. Navarro, about an example of how you are improving instruction. You're making an investment in your teachers with providing them professional development, especially the comment you made about the teachers who were going to teach AP classes for the very first time. If teachers have never taught AP classes, it is a different beast, right? I remember the first time I taught an AP biology class, I didn't have that extra professional development. Yes.
No, thank you.
No.
Science is the best topic.
So I just really appreciate you looking at how you can use the funding that you do have to invest into your people. Because when we invest in our people, right, we invest in our teachers, then we see growth in the classrooms. And as you know, I'm very passionate about professional development with respect to teachers. So I appreciate that. One of the things I know you guys will talk about, continue to talk about, and I think it's really important for everyone to really still acknowledge the deficits that we had in our learning because of the pandemic. And when you talk about state assessments, and then especially 5th grade, 8th grade, those are major years. So the students who were in 5th grade that we were talking about a few years ago that had that deficit because of the pandemic, now they're in 8th grade. So you have to keep in mind that connection to that test data. And I think sometimes it would be too easy for us in 2024 to forget what our kids went through, what we went through. But there's also, you've done a great job to bring those students up, to bring them back, but it is a struggle. It is a struggle. So when we're communicating, we have to, I know I will always be knowledgeable of that, and I always keep that in the back of my head when I'm looking at the data. The other thing is I appreciate all of the hard work that everyone does and understand that raising taxes is not just as easy said than done. It is something that we try to avoid. Since I've been elected in 2014, we have not raised the tax rates. And that is not something that I would like to do, or that I'm not open to that conversation. I really want to make sure that we're using our monies effectively, and we are finding the best way to use the monies that we do have to improve instruction. So I will continue to work with you to make sure that we can increase the funding, increasing the amount that we go over maintenance of effort. And something that I heard last budget cycle that really left an impression on me, and again, you've mentioned it today, it's regarding the slide. Whoops, sorry. Very sensitive mic. My apologies. The slide number 5. And as we go into our next budget cycle, the data at a glance, on slide 5, you list the percentage of the approved local funding to the school system. And I will personally make sure I pay close attention to that percentage, because the cost of doing business for all industries have increased, including education. And so yes, in Charles County government, we have increased the size of Charles County government. And I think that's I think that has affected the percentage of money that the school system has obtained each year. So I think as a commissioner, it's our responsibility to pay close attention to, you can't keep increasing the size of county government if we're not funding certain categories. So I think in doing the budget, that's just something we're going to have to be mindful of. And then lastly, this is something that you mentioned in the beginning, Dr. Navarro, but I would really greatly appreciate if you talk more, because I don't think everyone understands the commitment and the financial impact special education has on the school system. Yes, I know a little bit more probably than the average person viewing public, but I really think I would appreciate if you would spend some time to really explain how the cost of business have increased. Your special education population has increased. Not just providing services, but the cost for doing evaluations and the cost for out of county instructional supports, but also students that have to leave the county. Can you just talk a little bit more about that so folks understand that increased funding that your special education category is receiving, and
And it's not because, I'm gonna end on this point. The McDonough renovations, that's a great, right? That was a once, and it's so wonderful, right? We'll be able to provide future generations another instructional outlet. But when you come to special education services, that's a federal law. So you don't have wants, they are requirements. So can you talk about that funding and how, and do you get, and can you describe, does the state give you additional funds and how much additional funds for special education students? So thank you.
Yes, so I'll start and I'll pivot to Karen for some of the funding pieces and Kevin Lowndes as he oversees the special education realm. But in a practical sense, we have seen, so we are probably 12% of our students, a little bit over, between 12 and 13% of our students that receive special education services. And that is a range of services. You mentioned a couple things that have increased in cost. So they may receive services through a therapist of some type, occupational therapy, speech therapist. So when you think about the contracts that we have with individuals to come in and provide those services, the cost of that has gone up. The other piece that has happened is it's hard to find all of these additional services and people to provide those services during the school year. And so because of federal law, we're required to provide those services, and if we don't provide the services during the school year, we need to make sure that those services still happen, and so there's increases in compensatory services. So if you think about all the contracts that are tied to educating a wide range of students with disabilities with varying needs, it ranges from the people that are providing those services to sending students to specific schools where they are educated to their needs, which means transportation. I mean, I met the couple that takes, because it's a bus attendant and the bus driver that take some of our students all the way to Baltimore. They don't come back and then go back out to pick them up. They stay there all day and then they come back with the students. It's a long day. It is a contract that we need to have, and it is a contract that is way more expensive than any route within Charles County for all-day routes. That's just the reality of it. So the compounded expenses, we also support educating and providing services to students that have needs starting from birth. So that's a misnomer that people think, oh, when kindergarten starting pre-K or K, we also start providing services and we send people to the home. And frankly, we have seen increases in the number of students that in those early 0 to age 5 need services. And so we are hiring more and more people to be those people to provide early intervention services to the home. So those are additional contracts that we have every year. We receive state funding, and the blueprint does have very strict guidelines of how funding has to follow special education. But before the blueprint, educators were always saying for the state funding allocations and even the local funding allocations that we have been spending more on special education, and again, Charles County is not alone in this, than we actually get funding for. And when that funding becomes restricted in other pots and we can't sort of borrow from this pot of money to offset the additional cost of special education, it becomes tighter and tighter for us to be able to make localized decisions. And that is an important point in how we think as influencing the legislation of when you create legislation that is very, very tight in how expenditure happens, because in the reality of the day-to-day funding decisions, it puts limitations on how we're able to make site-based decisions on how to best serve our students. The intent of the blueprint is extremely important in that they are subgroups that are called out of students that need more funding. But I'm telling you, it's not as simple as that. It's in the day-to-day application of those funding, and when it's more and more restricted, it just becomes a little bit more difficult for us to do. You mentioned a little bit about how that funding happens. I'll turn it to Karen to give you kind of an overview of what funding we get statewide, what's the local, and how do we, and we do get obviously IDA funding, which is federal funding. But the majority of our funding is by far local and state funding.
So the funding is determined based on the enrollments throughout the state. So, where we fall in that mix is how much we get. And as Dr. Navarro said, it is true that all of the counties in Maryland, the CFOs have talked about it and have recorded it, spend much more than what we receive in funding. And the part about it being restricted or unrestricted, I hope I'm explaining it well. When we don't have, in this case for last year, $28 million that was not covered by the restricted funding specifically for special ed, I have to cover that with the unrestricted funding that we have before we can do anything else, because that has to be taken care of along with the transportation. So it just limits our ability to do anything that is not required by law. And that, that is difficult because the chart that we had of all the things that we want from a school system comes out of that unrestricted pot. So it's, it's just a challenge that we have to face. And the blueprint changed our ability to use the funds the best way possible. And the intent is good. I mean, the intent is we need to be spending money in certain ways, but it just ties our hands and being able to make any other decisions.
Did you want to add anything, Mr. Lowndes?
One of the things I want to add is that we are seeing many more families moving in with students that are receiving special education services. And for example, at a meeting yesterday, because in one of our programs, or street programs, we had 25 kids move in from July 1 till now. And so we didn't, originally think we were going to have this number of students within this program. And not only are the students moving into this program, but they're moving in with intense needs, which means that they have to get more services, which requires then more OT, more PT, more speech, and those prices have all gone up as well. The other thing that we did this year, which is great, was we added the 3-year-olds coming in for our general education population for a full day. Well, in the past, we had 3-year-olds in pre-K, but it was really only a half day because we didn't have a general education program. Well, as soon as you add a general education program, you have to match the same number of hours and services for your special ed with the general education. So we had to double the amount of time our students, our 3-year-old students receiving special education services got in the schools. Instead, doubles the number of classes that you need, doubles the number of teachers that you need receiving special education services. And the other thing is that since we went full day with special education students, 3-year-olds, we had many more families come back to us and take advantage of that. So last year, we budgeted for around 50 students, and now we're up to 66 already, which is quite a few for students receiving special education services. And so it required actually some more teachers and more classrooms. And that's why the Waldorf Center is bigger than it was in the past, because of the number of students that we, like you say, by law, we have to serve in the county. So special education prices, it is going up. It is becoming more expensive, and we do provide a great service here in the county, so people do move in for it as well.
And if I could add quickly, did you want to?
I just want to say I appreciate the responses, and just one last thing, I just really appreciate you, the board and staff and the superintendent, working with improving and increasing your working with the College of Southern Maryland, with allowing our students to take classes there, because I said many years ago, the more students we can get to take classes at CSM means the more students out of our buildings, right? So, yeah, so thank you for that.
I was going to add, Commissioner Stewart, we actually have 2 presentations today, one on the IEP process and one on supporting students with disabilities. So in your copious free time, please feel free to join us. And also, if I could add, yeah, I know, it's riveting stuff, I know. And also, I mean, I know you know, but just for the benefit of the public, anyone who may not know, many of us here are parents. So when you talk about that COVID gap, I have a 5th grader. And when everything started, he was in kindergarten, and he didn't go back until 2nd grade, and he was behind for years. And it's because of CCPS. It's because of our involvement as parents. It's because we threw everything at the wall until he finally accepted, okay, I guess I have to read, as no one was giving up. I mean, it is what it is. It was a fight because he's a very gregarious child. He likes to be in person. And so many students struggled being behind that computer all day. It was painful. And then speaking of CSM, shameless plug, as you know, my daughter is thriving now because of that. And many of our students are now able to do the early college and will graduate with associates. That's phenomenal. So yeah. Do you want to? And let me forget you, Mr. Lucas. Yeah.
Are having struggles, but we still have adults that are still having struggles.
Yeah.
And so we can't expect more of our children than we can of ourselves.
Yeah.
I think it's so easy for people to forget that, but we need to have grace and we need to have understanding, and we just need to continue like you are, just not just helping your children, you have to help your staff too, to make sure they're okay.
Amen.
So thank you.
Cover that as well. Thank you. Mr. Lucas, thanhank you for yet holding on.
So, actually, Ms. Stewart touched on the things that I want to talk about, but I think this puts a bow on it. If you can go to slide 6, or page, slide 6.
Funding challenges. Yeah.
Right there. Okay. Yeah.
Funding
There you have it.
challenges.
Okay.
Yeah.
So those things up there, and please, if I'm incorrect, chime in. Those are all things that we have to do because of law or policy. And where it says state and local share, that's the amount of money that is obligated because of law by each of those entities. So what you see in red, that $61 million line, which is dominated by special education and transportation, those are things that we have to take out of Hyde from our overall per pupil allowance. So, you keep hearing the term unfunded mandate.
There it is.
There it is, all right? And so that is really what hinders us from wanting to do things as was submitted in our last budget. The after-school activity buses and things like that. Things that we know holistically are good for a child, but again, you have to operate within those fiscal constraints. But as our county grows, and Mr. Lowndes touched on it, we're seeing an increase in student populations that historically, not just here, but across the country, have been underserved and don't achieve as well. And those are kids in poverty, English language learners, and the special education population. Those have grown dramatically in the past 10 years. And I mean, particularly English language learners, up almost over 400% in 10 years. And so that investment is going to have to be made, and that's, again, going to have to take away from other things unless the funding comes through that we'd like to do. But, so, thank you, Dr. Stewart, for commenting on that, but I wanted to get back to what Commissioner President Collins asked. I don't think I heard it answered, where we and everybody else are making this investment in the blueprint. So what are the metrics to gauge whether, not just us, but any school system is successful, and what is success? Are there hard metrics that get looked at in terms of standardized test scores or things of that nature? And not enough time to go into gory detail, but maybe Ms. Miller could touch on that. Are there specific things? Because, as our funding source, you have a right to know, and certainly the public who funds it has a right to know, when we make this investment, what are the expected outcomes?
And Mike, to be fair,
Yeah.
when that question was broached to the state superintendent, it was not a clear answer.
Well, and that's why I'm bringing it up now.
I understand that's a challenge.
Yeah.
But for us,
yeah, it's valid.
We want to be able to, again, grade what performance success looks like with funding and funding responsibilities. And I think as part of that AIP and the efforts, that are jointly being established, I think that assists us in decision making. And because I will emphasize again our absolute support as a board for the full implementation of the blueprint. That's the bottom line. So we're all on the same page with that. we also have responsibilities as it relates to funding public education, because that is something that our citizens require. That is something that is extremely important to the general public, period.
Yeah, that's fair. Did you want to add anything, Ms. Miller?
Sure, yes. I would like to give a little more clarity to that. I don't want to speak for Dr. Wright, the state superintendent of schools, but it's almost like we planted Commissioner Stewart and gave her the questions ahead of time. And Commissioner President Collins, you as well. I want to talk about, there is a working group right now that's established up at MSDE, and what they're doing is they're having these same conversations about how do we measure the success of the blueprint. And we have some representation on that committee with Dr. Navarro, we're very proud to have her on that. But we're looking at different measures to see how well a district is implementing. So we're looking at the retaining of our teachers within our district as a measure. We're looking at the diversity of our teachers as a measure for the blueprint. We're looking at the mental health and the supports and the practitioners that are provided to students as a measure of success. We look at those, and Ms. Stewart was referencing the expert review teams. As they go in, every single school in the state of Maryland will receive a visit from an expert review team within the next 10 years. And again, as a shameless plug, if you go onto our website, the ccboe.com right-hand tab under quick links, and you go to Blueprint, you will see the reports of our 4 schools last school year that received these visits from expert review teams. So thank you for that comment. And you know, we're very proud of the work that we saw for these 4 schools, but we know the next steps that we need to take. But there is this notion, and there's this importance of how do we measure the success of this? So it's not just about the test scores. Test scores are going to be something that we're looking at as measures of success. But as we look at those 5 pillars, there are measures and metrics that we're going to be looking at over the next 10 years to see the implementation of the blueprint.
And I just want to point out, for families, I have these complicated conversations many times, because what happens also in public education in Maryland is that the state assessment has changed. And it has changed every 4 years or so. And the task force that I'm involved in with Dr. Wright is looking at, and she has said that our state assessment will change yet again. And so to Mr. Lucas' points and to Commissioner President Collins' points, it becomes difficult for you as elected officials in the public. If it's hard for me when I'm sitting by the pool side or at the soccer field or the football field, and a parent is just asking me, what do I do? What do I pay attention to? That's part of the conversations, and I think the presentation Mr. Lowndes is going to do later today, where I say to my parents, and I give them advice, as they come up to you and ask you these questions. The state assessment is an accountability of districts, systems, schools. The school systems use diagnostic assessments that they follow throughout the year to monitor progress, because the reality is that parents are not sitting around sometime in July or August waiting for last year's results of their kids. And teachers don't function like that. So that's why we use iReady, and we tell parents, follow the reading scores that kids are doing, the proficiency levels. And frankly, we have some difficult conversations to talk about as educators for the rest of the public around the fact that across the districts, all of our diagnostic assessments, whether they be iReady or NWA MAP assessments, are showing better progress and higher progress than what our state assessment is showing. So I agree. I think we also have that problem of being consistent with metrics for multiple years that people can hang their hats on and say, I understand, and this is how you follow the progress. What I also say to folks is the school system and the board required this of me when I came on board, and I think it will continue to do so. We develop a strategic plan, and I always say to the parents, if you want to look at the systems progress, and a lot of them are tied to blueprint initiatives, look at the strategic plan, because there's metrics in the strategic plan around, did we say we're going to do what we're going to do? And how are our kids doing, right? We have on the website right now how many kids in middle school are taking high school classes, and how are they doing in them? It's not just taking them, but how are they doing? That's an important metric. That's not articulated necessarily in the blueprint, but the blueprint requirements for college and career readiness necessitates that we give opportunities in middle schools that open the high school schedules. And I will be working with Jake as his kids go to high school, so that he understands as a parent how to maximize the education system to get the most out of it. And I need that to happen for every parent in this school system. And so that's how we and I say to parents all the time, look at the strategic plan. That's our local plan. Those are our local metrics. That's my performance indicators. I get evaluated by nice 9 people on those, but that's our local accountability. And some of them, because we are struggling to talk about AIB accountability, state board accountability around the blueprint, the strategic plan is what localizes a lot of that information and captures it for family consumption, which is always what I worry about when you have a parent who is trying to figure out, how do I get my kid to catch up and be reading on grade level so they're successful later.
Do we have, okay, hold on, someone who hasn't spoken before. Okay, I'll go with Commissioner Coase and then Ms. Smith.
Sure.
Thank you so much. I have a couple questions. I know we should be, I'm going to revert back to the budget now, okay? Speaking about the budget, I'm not sure if there's confirmation whether the state has or plan on cutting the budget. If that happens, what's the impact to our students in the educational system? And I think a lot of people don't even know per pupil cost, what that average cost is in comparison even from now to what you're talking about in implementing the blueprint. And if you can share some of that cost. I'll let you answer that, and then I might have a follow-up. So,
this is, honestly, I think it's extremely important for us locally to be sitting around the table having discussions. I am also concerned about state funding support for education moving forward. We as a state just went through and have a huge expense with the Key Bridge that's going to have, we don't understand yet the ripples effects for all agencies of the state. And so we're going to be watching that carefully. I think, Commissioner Coates, what I would say to it is, this is why we're also starting early. We're having these projected groups so that we can, if we project out and think about everything that we think we're going to need to spend on, our IT equipment, our transportation costs, our people costs, salaries, wages, benefits, what we need to do moving forward, and we do it over multiple years, we can better create a picture that when there are changes that we were not anticipating, both negative and potentially positive, we can make some adjustments thinking about out there projections. But I do think, and I keep saying, I think our legislative breakfast is going to be an important discussion, because there's things brewing around codifying cost and potentially bringing legislation that allows better financial rollout of some of these initiatives within an amount of time that makes sense. Right? These projections of how to quickly move in certain areas of the blueprint, frankly, we can't keep up with cost. The state can't keep up with costs. Local agencies can't. So that's going to be an important conversation that I think, as we find more and more information on that, we plan to come to you and say, here's our best thinking on some things that don't shy away from reform. And there's no Charles County does not shy away from putting programs in and doing reform work that it needs to do. Mm-hmm. But the spacing it out financially and responsibly is our job. The devil's in the detail, and we do have to think about that. So we do plan to come to you with our best thinking as we get ready for legislative season.
So as a follow-up, I wanted to follow up. For those expenses or so for those services that are not going to be covered, are they perhaps maybe, maybe you're looking at the future that they may not be, will they be inclusive? And that's important also to make sure that we understand the breakout. Will they be inclusive of those less funding source that the state may not provide? Will they be included in our local budget to say, how can you guys offset, or we're coming to you to offset any of those funding mechanisms that the state cannot or will not provide?
So there is always expenses that have a local impact that we don't have a lot of state funding for, because a lot of it is tied up. So the extracurricular activities and the buses to go along with that would have to be a very locally burdensome ask, because we don't have a lot of flexibility with funding being restricted, to be able to use some of the state funding to cover some of those pieces. This is why we work together around what are the asks and what is it that we feel very strongly, the board feels very strongly are the needs, and understanding from your perspectives is what is that local, the local funding viability looking like as well. And it used to be, in some locations, people don't talk to each other. I always think it's important if we plan together and there's mutual accountability as we bring both boards the best possible thinking and budgets and responsible funding along the way. Karen?
So I want to assure the commissioners that I think what you're asking also is, do we evaluate our budget? If we have lost funding from the state, are we evaluating what we're doing and where we can save so that our ask of the local government is more reasonable? So a couple years back, we did eliminate 26 positions, which was about $2 million from our budget, so that our ask was much more reasonable. In this particular budget cycle, we did reduce our budget by $4.8 million of areas where we thought that we could temporarily cut costs and not spend that money, and with the hope, that we'll get better funding or more funding in the future. So we do that on a regular basis. It reaches a point, though, depending on how drastic the state cuts us, that it has to be a more collaborative conversation about where can we get that money, because 80% of our budget is people and benefits. So that, that's where that gets a little tricky. But we do that on an ongoing basis throughout the year. When we have unexpected expenses that come up, we look at our budget and see if there are other areas we can pull it from. And we understand the need to try to keep the ask reasonable of the local government.
Thank you.
Say that again?
80% of our budget is
People and benefits.
I think that's really important to understand. Without people and benefits, we can't educate children.
Yeah.
Well, actually, it's actually higher.
It's closer to 90.
It's closer to 90
90.
once you do the contracts for transportation, which are people,
nurses.
and the
Yes.
nurses,
Yeah.
which are in the form of contracts.
The public really needs to hear, right? And it's important statistic, data science fact, if I can use that word, that people need to understand.
So I do have a question about the transportation. I do see that the state share, local share 0, and then your total for transportation, total funding, 47 million.
And that's based on the state's funding. So prior to the blueprint, there really wasn't a local share that was assigned to the counties to contribute towards the blueprint. So when you look at the funding sheets from the state, it doesn't necessarily say that the county has to give us X amount of dollars. So that comes out of the unrestricted amount of money that we have from the county. So that's coming straight from their aid formulas that they have.
Okay. Not necessarily locally. Local
Right, it's not what Jake says I should spend the money on. It's just what the state has provided for us.
Thank you.
Ms. Smith?
Well, first I want to totally appreciate Ms. Acton's point just around how we temper our request.
before it comes to the commissioners. So we too work to be fiscally conservative prior to the budgets coming to you all. But one of the things I sort of heard throughout the conversation was that the cost of business has increased. Not just the services, not just the contracts, but the expectations of what our parents and what our community members want from the education system also has increased. As you all traverse the county, as we all do, I'm sure you're speaking to constituents, business owners, parents who want to better understand what are they getting from their education system. And so we are working to ensure that we're able to address those needs, not just the needs, but the desires as well. So I believe gone are the days, and I'm sure we all can agree, of where we just exit kids from the system who can read and write. There's so much more that they have to be able to do to compete on the world stage that was shared earlier. So I'm always curious, like, because you all have a different vantage point than we do, we focus on the education of it, right? Like, and I can listen to Dr. Navarro talk all day about education. But like, you all are seeing budgets from a variety of different, community organizations, community partners, agencies who are also requesting funding. And I'm curious, throughout the year, what are the talking points or the data points that we can provide you to truly help you understand the impact that's happening on this side of the table so that you can be able to combat some of the noise or misinformation that's happening, whether it be in conversations with business owners or on social media, so that you all have the real facts and talking points of what's happening on this side of the table, what's happening with students, what's the impact of all the services that we're providing on the test scores, on the aptitude, on the social and emotional health of our students and of our educators. I'm just curious, like, what would be some of those sound bites or talking points that we can provide you throughout the year just to help you better advocate for education?
Because I have to get ready to leave, and so I'm sure my colleagues will have comments. But I just wanted to first off thank you, because I think this is exactly what we visualize, this continued dialogue between the two boards. But the point that I raised earlier, that was really the critical issue, just performance. Because, I mean, what I've learned is when you make things plain, that allows everyone to fully understand what you're trying to say. What we want is an elite, top-tier public education system. Everyone in this room wants that and expects that. And that's what our citizens want. And that's what they want to see. When they see discussions about funding in public education, they want to see that our school system is continually on a positive trajectory. That's what everyone wants to see. And so to the extent that you can assist us, look, I mean, Dr. Stewart she's an educator, I'm not an educator. And so for me, the discussion has to be very basic. You're laughing. You're laughing.
I think it's a basic moment in your phone. I think there's not one basic moment in your basic phone you have.
No, but keep it plain. That's the point. I can tell you, I was educated in the Charles County Public Schools. My children went through Charles County Public Schools. Both of them are doing outstanding. I am proud of this system, but we're dealing with a major challenge as it relates to the blueprint. And I want to continue this type of discussion, and hopefully I answered your question. It is the performance side that's the issue. But thank you.
Commissioner Collins, I know you have to leave, and Dr. Navarro really responded, but she said it really pretty. I'm going to tell you, plain language, about that data. The state keeps changing the assessments, right? So now the state is asking school districts to compare apples to oranges. And because they keep changing the assessment, it is so difficult to compare how a student did in 3rd grade versus 5th grade. It is so difficult. And at the state level, they need to get it together. They keep changing this assessment. It's not like when we were in school with the Maryland functional test. It was the same for years. So that's a huge problem. So when you're talking to the state folks and the state superintendent,
make sure you plug that. Yeah, we would appreciate that. Thank you, Commissioner Collins, I appreciate it. Thank you. A quick time check, we have about 15 minutes remaining. I know you could stay all day, much appreciated. Yeah, I was gonna say, I wanna, you sure, yeah. I wanna just,
Final point.
I'm sorry?
Commissioner Coates had a thought.
Oh, yes.
You guys are not lost for words. So I don't think that that's going to be an issue here. But you, I mean, you're echoing it as we speak, the collaboration, the partnership. You're echoing exactly what is needed for this to work and for this community to move forward. We don't know what that outcome is going to be in the very, very, very near future. We know we have to, what they call do something, okay, this quote, but we don't know what that something is right now because it's very challenging. We have challenging budgeting coming up. What are we going to do? And this is why I was asking the question, if that state in which we're probably going to see, everyone is going to start cutting, what does that look like? Because we don't want our students we want a successful learning environment for our students. And we want to know how we can actually move that forward. So your partnership, please continue echoing that. Please continue this collaboration. And I think that we can see a success in the very, very near future.
Much appreciated, Commissioner Coates. All right, in our remaining minutes, I'll focus on the colleagues that haven't had a chance to speak. So I believe Mr. Hancock, Ms. Kramer, and then Ms. Warren, if you have anything, or Ms. Thomas. You don't have to, but if you had anything you'd like to share. Okay, Mr. Hancock.
Oh, thank you, and I'll try to be brief. Actually, I have a question I believe Ms. Miller can answer. But before I do that, I just want to clarify, I've heard the word tax increase mentioned a few times. I want to clarify that I am 100% not in favor of a tax increase. I hope that we can
let's just
work,
get that straight, right?
just speaking for myself, but I hope that we can work with, collaboratively to increase our funding without having to do that. And I think that's everybody's goal, really. But a real quick question. I know we've talked a lot about the issues that we are facing this year in regards to the blueprint. But Ms. Miller, I believe we've had this conversation before that in the years to come, it's the amount of money that's going to be designated for blueprint is actually going to increase even more. Is that correct?
So Blueprint funding will increase, but there's going to be more things that we're required to do with that funding. So for example, the career ladder, which is being implemented now, we're going to have to look at this rollout of the 60-40 split. And so the 60-40 split is where 60% of a teacher's time is going to be spent working and teaching directly to students. 40% of that time is going to be other duties, such as participating or facilitating professional learning, working with students one-on-one. There's a whole list from the AIB, but that means with that, we'll have to hire more teachers in order to teach the kids. So while we will see an increase in a rollout of additional funding, there's also more services that the school system is going to be responsible for providing directly to students. So yes, it is good news, but then there's also that and part.
The and part is actually what I was trying to get at. So there's more obstacles in the future, challenges, I guess you could say, because there are the blueprint provides a lot of opportunity, and it's a lot of good things involved in that. But I think the biggest issue everyone's had with this is when it was designed in Annapolis, there really was no mandated funding source, and now you guys have to deal with that, and we have to deal with that. And it would be nice if there was a legit funding source for that. But thank you, Ms. Miller. And that's all. The only question I had. I know Commissioner President Collins left, but again, thank you both, and thank you, Commissioner Collins as well, and all of your staff for being here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I just want to just reiterate, I don't think it can be overstated enough that we are
this partnership is very critical to not just, education, but to our county, in general and overall, and that we are working towards the same goal as the Board of Education, the school system, and the Board of Commissioners. We all want a high-quality education, as, Commissioner President Collins stated, and that's what drew a lot of residents to our county. I know that's what drew me here 20 years ago when my older kids were small. I was looking around the state to find where was the lowest property taxes, right? And where could I get the best public education for my kids? And that's what brought me here to Charles County, and I know that resonates with a lot of residents today. And so we have to maintain that momentum if we want to continue to see growth in our county and continue to see our county move forward the way that we all want our county to be able to grow and move forward and thrive. I think student achievement, we have to keep at the forefront. I know as the Board of Education, we always are talking about student achievement. So as Madam Chair Morley said, our agenda is tied to the strategic plan, because we want to make sure that the public and everyone understands that student achievement is at the center and the forefront of everything that we're doing. And that's why we're here to have these conversations, because it just can't be overstated enough. And as Commissioner President Collins said, that's what our citizens want. They want to see student achievement. They want to see performance. They want to see improvement. They want to see more programs like the Fine Arts program, the Theater Arts program at McDonough, which, by the way, that black box is pretty special. I have been. So highly recommend. All the theater programs in Charles County are amazing. But in all the other additional things that we're offering, to I think Ms. Smith's point, and I think Ms. Miller and Dr. Navarro has been stated multiple times, that are not included in the blueprint, but these are things that our citizens who are coming to our county are expecting. Because quite honestly, as Dr. Navarro said, we were behind in a lot of the things that, prior to Dr. Navarro's tenure, that Charles County should have, quite honestly, had already, and we didn't. And, that's, kudos to Dr. Navarro and our staff, who has really hit the ground running over the last several years and brought some of these programs. I mean, we just opened our first dual immersion program at Middleton. I mean, these are things that are attractive to residents. It's attractive to our current citizens and citizens who may be looking at Charles County to move to and to raise their families and to educate their children. Mm-hmm. And I just want to say that, again, it is a complex issue, right? It's not a 1 + 1 = 2. There's so many factors that go into the decision making for education. But school systems, as has been said a few times, but bears repeating, are not immune to inflation. So we're all dealing with that, right, in the economy. And so in the interest of plain language, as Commissioner President Collins requested, I'm sure most of you are like me, so you're using the same amount of electricity in your home, but you're paying significantly more for it.
Oh,
okay?
Yeah.
And that's
yeah.
just one example. That's just one
yeah.
example, right? That's just one example. Groceries. You may be buying the same amount of groceries. My family hasn't grown any more in the last 5 years. I have the same amount of people, but I'm paying significantly more for the same things. And so what the school system is being asked to do is not only provide the same services, but provide more services. And so MOE, maintenance of effort, has really not kept pace with that. And while we do appreciate the increase that we've received over MOE over the last several years, it's still being outpaced by the demands, as you can see. And so we're just, we want to continue this partnership, continue working with you. As Mr. Lucas mentioned, all the unfunded mandates, these are things that none of us here really have any control over, but we're trying to find solutions for. And I think that this partnership is really critical to that. And I just hope that we can keep in mind that we're working towards the same goal. We're on the same team. And so I just want to continue these conversations and appreciate y'all being here. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kramer. All right, we have 7 minutes. Dr. Navarro, any last points? And then I'll, do you want to?
I'm sorry. I'll be 2, maybe 3 minutes. So I really wanted to just provide some context to slide number 5, which did show the slice of the pie of going toward the school system down slightly. But I don't want to lose any sight of that, in the last 10 years, our funding towards the school system has grown significantly. The last 3 years has been unprecedented growth to the school system, and we've been doing what we can. I would even want to point out that in fiscal year 2024, we fully funded the request. So at the time when the slice of the pie was 41.5%, we were still able to fund your needs and your requests. And I want to point out that the county is growing in all areas. And the reason why that slice has gotten smaller is because we're putting funds in the budget in other spots. For example, what you don't see there is the debt service budget. Our debt service slice of the pie has grown by 1% to 2%. That ensures funds are going to Mike Heim to ensure that the Piccoaxon Middle School is enclosed, that the McDonough High School has those renovations. And there's also that we've been funding schools. For example, there's a new elementary school being built right down the street. So I don't want to lose sight that there's other funding in the budget that's going to the school system that you're not seeing there. And I also want to point out the demands that we're seeing and outside the school system. We did a community survey just last spring, and the number one demand from our citizens was public safety. So we were able to use those funds in this year's budget to support 10 new sworn officers, as well as additional crews for our emergency services. In the last 10 years, when you look at that chart, we've added just under 100 new positions, EMTs and paramedics. So that ensures that when someone calls 911, there is someone there to get to the door to save them. Public safety is always a high priority with our citizens, and the Board of County Commissioners and us have to manage that when we're focusing on the funding requests and needs for the county. And we're also seeing lots of requests and demands from our aging population, as well as our youth when it comes to recreation, parks, and tourism services. So we appreciate everything we do. I love the collaboration. I would say my collaboration with Ms. Acton, I've been with the county for 22 years. I would say the first 10, 15 years, the collaboration wasn't as positive as it is now. We love working with Karen Acton and the rest of the crew over there in this building. So I do want to just provide some context where the funding's going, because the funding's going somewhere, and we're trying to meet the demands of our community, not only in education, but in our public safety and our parks and recreation services.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Navarro?
So I will just, I just want to get a nod from the commissioners and the board that you are agreeing to have Jake's teams and Karen's team come back and do a deeper dive as we do fiscal projections, because you see all the competing needs, and so kind of doing that.
Sorry,
can't ask for a nod.
You can't ask for that. I only have 2 of them here, so there's.
Okay. So we will wait to hear back from the commissioners around wanting to meet in early spring to get the boards back together to get a presentation. I think I got the votes. But I think the commissioners, and thank you, and so that we can come back, and the devil's in the detail, and I think Jay correctly cues up that your world is bigger than education. Our world is obviously education, but we see the exact same proportional demands on education as in other agencies are seeing, right? And so we do a lot of mental health now that we didn't used to do as educators. It's incredible, right? So I'm hoping that we can come back and provide more detail. This is ongoing conversations, and I just look forward to our next conversation around the legislative breakfast.
Absolutely. And thank you all very much again for joining us this morning. We will continue these discussions when we have a quorum of the Board of County Commissioners, of course, to be in agreement. Mr. Schwartz, I believe we need to make a motion, if you could, please.
Motion for the board to meet in executive session as permitted by the Maryland Open Meetings Act, Section 3-305 and 3-103 of the General Provisions article, to discuss personnel matters concerning the superintendent's recommendations on certificated positions and matters related to employees, litigation update concerning potential lawsuit involving the board, legal advice concerning all of that, and administrative function matters concerning board operations, the superintendent's evaluations, and an operations update from the superintendent concerning graduations and the budget, and a legal appeal. Lots to talk about.
I move that we move to executive session.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second, okay. It's been moved and seconded. All in favor? Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Colleagues, can we reconvene at 11:15, please? All right. Please take us off. Thank you, Jake.